Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Lazouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we'll talk about plastic. So I hope, it's not something that we are seeing a lot on the podcast. So mainly talking about some material like plastics. But for the design and the use of medical devices, plastic is one of the material that everybody is having. But there are a lot of things to understand about the choice of your plastics. And for that, I have with me Lucas Pianegonda, who will be helping us to understand all that. So Lucas, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
Great. So, Lucas, first, maybe before we dig inside all this great topic, because you are really a specialist of that. So, can you tell us more about yourself and who you are exactly?
Okay, so I'm Lucas Pianegonda, and I studied material science initially, then went on to work for a plastics manufacturer near where I live. It's called Emskemi, where I did material testing, mainly mechanical testing. Then I went on to be a project manager for Sulzer Mixpack, and where I did material changeover projects, material selection, consulting, internal consulting, and then went on to have more of a internal expert role with focus on sustainable plastics, material compliance, regulations, regulatory requirements, and overall internal consulting position, an expert for plastics. And then I thought that this would be a very good business model to have this as my own consulting company. And until now, I think I'm right. So there are not enough plastic experts for medical technology, and I think I'll win that bet. So
Okay.
I always say if I only have one or two sentences to introduce myself, I'm an expert for medical grade plastics, and I help medical technology companies choose the right plastic from a technical, regulatory, and sustainability perspective. And that's as easy as I can put it.
Okay, no, it's great. So, as you've said, so mainly plastic is really something that we are starting to use a lot, also for medical devices and for. I mean, it's something that we are using for our everyday life. So it's not like something only for the medical devices. But mainly, how can you explain to somebody how you will be choosing a plastic for a medical device? So mainly how we should work to identify the right plastic and the right material for a medical device.
Okay, so first of all, we start with your device, your risk classification, your intended use. What is the device? Is it a catheter? Is it a syringe? Is it crutches? Is it an implant? What is your exact device? Because first of all, you start with the requirements that you have for your device, and then you start translating that into requirements for your material. For example, you have something that stays in the body for 15 years. So you have to have excellent biocompatibility, and you need to have proof that this is an implantable plastic that you can use. A PEEK, for example. And then you have a syringe. There are totally different requirements. For example, a syringe needs, of course, it needs to be sterile. It needs to be biocompatible to a certain degree, but of course, it needs to be cheap. The mechanical properties have to be there. You have to have the tribological properties. So it has to run smoothly, the syringe. It doesn't have to have the stick slip effect. So you want to dose accordingly. So the requirements that you have for your device translate directly into the requirements that you have for your material. And there are a lot of different categories of requirements. There are technical requirements, strength and stiffness, and is it transparent, something like that. Chemical requirements, it has to be resistant against disinfectants, stuff like that. And then you have regulatory requirements. You have to be REACH compliant, biocompatible, etc., etc. And then more and more we see that we also have sustainability requirements. We want something with a lower footprint. We want something with bio-based recycled content. and we overall want to reduce the environmental footprint of our materials that we use. So if you have like the set of requirements, and we always discuss this with the customer, what is exactly needed, what is a must-have, what is a nice-to-have requirement.
Unearth the pulse of the medtech world with MedTech Conf, a dynamic platform featuring global events on medical devices, biologicals, IVD, and pharmaceuticals. Stay informed, stay ahead, connect, share, and elevate your knowledge. Become an official sponsor. Make your event shine on the map. MedTech Conf, your key to the medtech universe. Remember, the future is now, and it's at your fingertips with MedTech Conf.
And then we go on searching for different alternatives, and we do this down to the grade. It's not just like, yeah, use polypropylene, but I tell him you should use, for example, a Bormate type HD 810 MO. So you have a specific grade, and there's a specific manufacturer that you can purchase this from. It's not just the material per se, so polypropylene, homopolymer, something like that, but specifically from which supplier can you get this? So, and maybe there are several of them, and you compare them and you rate them according to the requirements. And then you have maybe 3 to 5, or sometimes even more or less, like one alternative that you can propose as a recommendation. And then you get a recommendation from me, and I tell you, yeah, for this device, I would use this because of this reason, and it fulfills the requirements, and we have alternative 1 and 2 that we could also work. And then you would, usually the material selection process is then not over, but you would sample. So you make a decision on paper basis, which ones of the plastics do you think that would work, but then you have to test that this is also true. So you would sample either your contract manufacturer, or if you manufacture the plastic parts yourself, you would sample this and then test this maybe in the final device, or you derive a verification test plan. You run this, and then you come back with the results and see, yeah, it works, or here and there we need to make some adjustments to the maybe to the plastic, but sometimes also to the design of the part. Because usually material selection goes hand in hand with new part design. You choose a plastic for a new device, a new design. And then after testing, you would have then the final material decision, and then it's basically, this is what we will use from now on, and you would then go into approval. Of course, biocompatibility testing is something that is very important. This is also part of the testing. Some biocompatibility tests can be done at the material, but usually it's the final device that you test.
Exactly.
And then this is how this process would work. And depending on your device, this can be half a year, this can be like 3-5 years until you have a material decision. And yeah, so this is basically how this goes.
Okay. And do you have like already, or is it existing, like a list of plastics that those plastics, no, we cannot use them at all? Maybe the reason is because, oh, they are cheaper, so maybe I want to use this plastic, but you say, no, we cannot use that because it's forbidden, or this plastic is forbidden for implantables, but it can be used for consumables, etc. So do you have those kind of also checklist, a list of, I can say, of those plastics?
I mean, there are certain substances that are right out banned. So there are substances like polybromated flame retardants that you just cannot use. But it's usually the exception that you really cannot use because it's banned. If you cannot use something, it's usually very difficult to get it because no one can sell it to you. So it's what happens more often is, the question is, can you produce a safe and effective device with this plastic? And if you can answer the question and you have proof for it, there is seldomly the FDA or the notified body telling you, no, you cannot use this. It is just, you have to prove that it's safe and effective. There are certain substances, usually plastics are very safe in general, and very biocompatible. It's usually the additives and basically the secret sauce that the manufacturers put in order to get their special properties, such as plasticizers, such as stabilizers, and that give you that have the properties of concern. For example, phthalates were used extensively in the past for plasticizing PVC. We got nearly rid of them in most of the PVC applications. I think blood bags are still made with PVC.
Okay.
But the EU has the plan to get rid of them until 2030 or something like that. So there are certain substances in plastics that you are not allowed to use or are advised against using, or have certain other requirements such as communication and justification. But in general, it's always the question, can you produce a safe and effective device with it? So it's not, there is a thing called medical grade. A medical grade is not really a term that is well defined, and the VDI, Verein Deutscher Ingenieure, made the attempt in defining what is a medical grade plastics in their guideline for, also called medical grade plastics, VDI 2017. And there's certain things that you should have with a medical plastics, and I really like the guideline because it puts it down to the minimum requirements. Change control, what happens if I have a change? Plastics or the additives, they tend to change because life happens. Earthquakes destroy my first source, or a company gets bought, my supplier gets bought, and they phase out certain substances. I don't get them anymore. I have a change. And then the change could impact your safety of your device, the biocompatibility, for example. And then how do I make sure that the plastic manufacturer gives this to me or informs me about this change? It's with the change control service, and with the medical grade plastic, you usually get you get this. Then you have formulation consistency, so they do not change the formulation unless they tell you, or unless they have to. And then there's regulatory support. So support, they give you all the regulatory documents that you need. They disclose formulation to biocompatibility test labs, or they have extractable leachables already tested, and sterilizability also already tested, stuff like that. But you are, from a MDR or from an FDA perspective, not obliged to use a medical grade plastics. There is no forcing you to use that. You could also use a so-called food grade, which is okay for food contact. It has no substances of concern in them because you wouldn't use it with food otherwise. It can be okay. It's dependent on the risk class. I mean, a food grade, they can change the additives as they want to, and they won't tell you. So the plastic manufacturers. And then if you do an implant from that's very critical. There's an unacceptable risk there. If there would be a change in formulation, you couldn't guarantee that this device is safe and effective. If you have something that is a very low risk device, crutches or things that are not in direct patient contact, like a electronics cover or something like that, you don't need to know every change. It's like it has to still be compatible with disinfectants, and the mechanical properties have to be okay, but there's no risk associated with it. So you always have to have the risk-based approach. Yeah, so it always depends on the risk class of your device, and you have to have a risk-based approach on what plastic you use.
Exactly. So mainly, as we talk about also the regulatory aspect, you mentioned some guidance. Is there some standard that people have to follow, or some testing on those standards, or some testing on plastic that you have to follow? Like we talk about biocompatibility, mainly, which is for any material or any product. But is there some specific things about plastic, like flammability or this kind of thing? So is there some standards that all the tests that you should do and you should be making to verify that your plastic is safe for implantable, for example? Because I think implantable is the more risky. For the other are more or less risky. So this is mainly the more risky for your plastics.
Okay, standards to follow. So number one is it depends on your market. So if you're bringing to market in the MDR EU, you have certain requirements, and for FDA you have other requirements, and then all over the world, depending on the regulation, you have other requirements. But usually they and you know this better than I do, of course. FDA and EU MDR are like the leading ones. Like all the other ones copy this homework. So in the MDR you have the general performance and safety requirements, which is in the annex, and then there is a section about materials, and there you have some stuff that materials have to have, like SVHC, you have to communicate and justify, carcinogenic, mutagenic, and toxic for reproduction substance, you have to justify, nanomaterials, latex, you have to communicate because of allergic reactions, and then some kind of biological materials. So if you have animal-derived components, for example, a heart valve from like a pig heart valve, you would have to justify and make a risk assessment and why are you using this, and have you properly made sure that there's no transmission of disease and stuff like that. Okay, but this is for material and it's not specific for plastics. It's just every material that you use has to have these requirements. Yeah, and then there are other requirements that are not specific to medical devices. So you have the, let's say, regulatory requirements that are specific to medical devices, which is the MDR. And then you have like everything else. And usually this is REACH in Europe. It's the registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of substances. So everything that is on a REACH list, namely SVHC, authorization and restriction list, is not a good idea to put in your medical device unless you have a very good reason for it. And then you have to justify the reason. Then there are substances that like outright forbidden, like POP, persistent organic pollutants, which would be the bromated flame retardants. And there are in general a plethora of regulatory requirements that I summarize under the term material compliance. Most importantly, it's REACH, and for medical devices that include electronics, it's RoHS, so restriction of hazardous substances in electrical and electronic devices. And so these are the most important ones, but there are other ones. And then if you're looking to the US, there's the TSCA, TSCA, and then there's Proposition 65, which is very complicated to get right. So there is a plethora of regulatory requirements, although I listed the most important ones. And this can be a daunting task, the regulatory requirements for materials, or the material compliance. And if you have no expert in-house, there's two ways to go about this. Either you train one. A little advertisement for myself. I have a course, regulatory requirements or regulatory aspects for material selection. It's in German, although I have it on the CATS in Aarau and in the SKZ in Germany, Würzburg. And this is number one. Or number two, you can also hire a consultant that helps you with this. Yeah, so that's about material compliance or regulatory requirements in selecting plastics.
No, great. So I think it's helpful for people to really understand that we have also those aspects for this. And mainly, you talked also about the food plastics or whatever. So I think also there are some, as you mentioned, regulation maybe for other types of legislation like food.
Yes.
So if it's not existing in medical device, maybe it's already existing in another legislation, so that you can use that as the state of the art, if I can say, instead of just saying there is no rule or no test existing. But if it's existing in another legislation that maybe makes sense, as you said, it's benefit risk analysis also, then you can also go and use this kind of standard.
Yeah, I mean, of course, tests. I mean, the ISO 1099318 chemical characterization, and then a toxicological risk assessment, and then you have pretty much everything that you need, and then you do the 10931, the risk assessment, and then you see which where do I miss data and where do I need to make tests. And the regulatory support with your supplier is very important if you have a very high risk device where you need to make a lot of tests, and maybe they can help you reduce this burden and get better or faster to market because they have data. They can help you with certain data gaps and you don't have to test them. So this is always important. And there's also like, you can also test for SVHC, for raw substances. There are certainly labs that have this. Usually it's better to rely on the materials supplier to give you a confirmation or a declaration of conformity to certain regulations, and then you're fine.
Exactly, yeah. So in the industry in general, we talk a lot about sustainability. So within your experience, do we see a lot of discussion in the medical device industry related to sustainability for plastics, like the fact that maybe we should recycle, be able to recycle, or to talk also about the end life of our products, and then plastic is one part of it. So do we have this discussion also that is happening?
Yes. So the medical device, medical technology in general, also pharma, they woke up on it. So they get it now. And if you have a look at the 100 biggest medical device manufacturers, how they're all called, like the big strategics, then you see that already around 40, it's like 39 of them are committed to the Science-Based Target Initiative. Science-Based Target Initiative is like a voluntary reduction of CO2. You set yourself goals and then you verify them within. So either
Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com.
39 of them have a commitment or a goal verified to reduce its carbon footprint. And if you like summarize the turnover that they have, it's like $300 billion in 2023. And the whole market is like 600 billion. So half of the market is already voluntarily committed to reducing CO2. And if you look at these companies, it's like, if you make the scope 1, 2, 3 analysis, like scope 1 is like what I emit directly. So if I drive a car, or if I burn oil or something like that to heat my buildings, I have direct emissions. Then I have indirect emissions, which is scope 2, electricity and heated steam that I get from someone else, but they emit CO2. And then you have scope 3, upstream and downstream. And this is also all the materials. And guess what? 90% is scope 3. So you have to touch your materials if you want to be serious about reducing CO2. So yeah, they're looking into replacing some of their fossil-based virgin plastics with other types of plastics. Although you have to say that plastics in general are usually a very sustainable choice. They're cheap, they're easy to manufacture. They do not use a lot of subsequent processing that you have with metal, that you have with ceramics. And they do not have this much of an environmental impact if you look at what their effect is, what they can do. So if you have like a very thin LDPE bag, 2 of them, and they hold a ceramic, steel, or titanium ball implant sterile, if this goes unsterile, yeah, like the CO2 impact of the device that they're packaging is like many times greater. It's like packaging steak. It's always better to package steak in plastic, although you have a certain environmental impact for the packaging. But like if the steak goes bad, the environmental impact of this food waste is so many times greater than the plastics that you use. So they also help preserve CO2 footprint in some ways. They're light, so they have lots of advantages. Although, yeah, you can do better if you use something like a bio-based plastic, something like a recycled plastics. But it's not that easy either to get it, and number two, to understand what the landscape of sustainable plastics is, and the implications on your device risk, so biocompatibility and stuff like that.
Okay.
Maybe a little detour on bioplastics. You have bio-based plastics, which is a polypropylene derived from a bio source. It's exactly the same as polypropylene, but just from a different source with a different environmental impact due to this bio source. And then you have something like PLA, polylactic acid, which is a biodegradable plastic, which can be derived from bio-based sources, does not have to, but and can then biodegrade. There are certain applications where it's interesting to have this, like an implant that dissolves, bioresorbable. But usually it's like shelf life is a topic and stuff like that. And then I think the other kinds of plastics that we have is recycled plastics. And we always put that in like one bucket, recycled plastics, but recycled plastics is not the same. It's like you have mechanical recycling, you shred it. It's basically those of you that are in German, like the gelber Sack, or like the PET
Shopping,
bottles that are in a closed loop. That is like mechanical recycling. And then you have solvent-based recycling. It's a little niche method, but there are companies that do that, like dissolve it in a solvent, and then you can separate out additives and colors and stuff like that. You get a better quality. And then you have chemical recycling, which is like either you go back to the monomer, or you go back to oil, or you go back to gas, and then you build a polymer again. You hold carbon in the loop, but this is very energy intensive. And then here you always get these very controversial discussions. Is it really better for the environment because you use like not so green energy to break down a plastic, and then the CO2 footprint is not really that better? But it's getting there. I think that the scalability, it's coming. They have new technologies, but it all takes time and billions to invest. So yeah, it's not that easy.
Exactly, yeah. And do you see some projects now where they will accept to use some recycled plastic and say,
Yes.
it's in our projects to now use recycled plastics, and to then also work in this sustainability program? And so there is no taboo, if I can say, on the industry about using that?
No. And if you're looking into the MDR, it's very clear. They always talk about material, and they do not talk about recycling. They do not talk about plastic, meaning recycled plastics have the same requirements as a virgin plastic. There is no exception. We cannot compromise on safety or effectiveness. But if you can do it with a recycled plastic and it's still the same in terms of safety and performance, it's okay, you can do it. And there is an example of a mechanical recycled plastic from recycled fridges. It's most probably polystyrol for a otoscope tip. An otoscope is something that a physician uses to look into your ear canal. And then there's a tip on top of that for cross-contamination purposes, so that you don't have
to not touch, to remove. It's like a disposable piece that you are putting just to hygienically not touch the patient.
That's exactly the purpose.
Make the device touch the patient, but really having this cover, this sleeve, if I can say that, is avoiding that. Yeah.
Yes, and that's a class 1 device that is on the market. with the mechanical recycled plastics. Yeah, of course, you have to have some quality and risk management measures in place, but it's not impossible. And it's not a taboo. It's like for some of the medical device companies, of course, it's a conservative business. If it works, don't touch it. And it could be approval irrelevant, so don't touch it. So very change averse. But I think for new devices, it's coming more and more. I see more the trend towards like mass balanced, bio-based plastics. So the plastics that are derived from biosources have the same properties, the same grades, basically, that have not implications on biocompatibility and all the risk of the devices. I see more trends towards that because it's like a drop-in solution. But it's not impossible to use recycled plastics, also mechanical recycled plastics. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. And as you said, it's also, as we said since the beginning, a risk-based approach. So mainly if the benefits are higher than the risk, and also it's something that has to be also evaluated and verified. But mainly it's that. Okay. Anything else that maybe you want to share about plastics, or maybe something that we forgot to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we should make a little advertisement for plastics because everybody trashes plastic because that's pun intended. Everybody trashes plastic because it's not sustainable. It ends up in the ocean. It's so bad for the environment. It's not actually not true.
You're killing some turtles, you're killing some fish, etc. for that.
Fun fact, the BBC turtle photo was photoshopped,
Okay.
That is there we are with fake news and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, of course, plastics ends up in the ocean, but that's a littering problem. And to take that out on medical devices, I think is unfair because medical devices will be usually incinerated. You can argue that incineration is not that great either. If you recover the energy, it's not that bad as ending up in the ocean. And we always think that like plastics is like a forever chemical that lasts forever in the environment. For those of you who have worked with UV resistance, with gamma resistance of plastics are actually not that stable. They are degraded to some degree. Of course, they're not like biodegradable that go away within a few months, but in a few years, like the 10 to 7 years, polypropylene is gone in the environment. So there's a lot of like myths about plastics, and they're made out to be the bad guy. And I think it's like they make us ignore the real problem because there's a lot of things going on with clean energy. Like I think most of the problem would be solved if we have like very cheap, very available, abundant green energy. Then you can solve a lot of problems. You can do carbon capture, you can do chemical recycling with green energy. But it's difficult. This is hard, and we're seeing this now. It's not that easy to provide a lot of energy in a sustainable way. That is also stable. That is also storable. And I think plastics are a little a distraction. Of course, I mean, we can always do better. We can do our part. There are better alternatives, but plastics is part of the solution and not a part of the problem. That's my opinion.
Great. Happy to hear that. So now, why people should maybe contact you? So how you can help them?
Okay. So if you have the typical project is like we are doing next gen for our medical device, and we now want to make it sustainable because we have like committed for these sustainability goals. We want to do better with our device. We want to reduce CO2. This is exactly where I come in. I can give you a material recommendation, or I can even like be like part of your team as a project support package. And this is one way that I can help you. Of course, if you would like to do stuff yourself, I can also help you train your staff or train you in sustainable plastics or material compliance. And there's also other things that I can help you with, like these regulatory topics, like writing statements for your customers, and stuff like that. So this is like the typical thing. How you can contact me, just go on www.gradical.ch, or I think you will
Yeah, I
link
will
my...
put on the show Gradical, so gradical.ch. So
and then you can contact me. We can have a chit chat about your problem, and then I see if I can help you. And I always have this strategy. If I cannot help you, if I'm not the right person for you, I try to maintain a network of expert that can help you. So I'm not... A lot of times people come to me with biocompatibility issues, and the first thing I tell them is, I'm no toxicologist. I cannot make you a tox risk assessment. I cannot do that because this is not my area of expertise. I can help you with testing and like the information about the plastic and properties of concern of certain substances. I can help you with that, but I will not do you. I cannot do the biocompatibility risk assessment for you. You need to go to someone else, and then I know people that can do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing the same, so it's what I'm saying. If I cannot do it, I will find you somebody to do it anyway, so it's not a problem at all. And if you need something about toxicology, we are doing that, so don't hesitate to contact us in case. Okay, so anyway, I will put everything on the show notes so people can go directly to look at that. And if they have questions, they can also place the question on the YouTube channel, or I will as we publish that on LinkedIn, so don't hesitate to ask your question directly to Lucas on LinkedIn. And contact directly Lucas if you have maybe a need of to work on a project and to get some expert working with you on your plastics. Okay, Lucas, it was really a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.
Yeah, thank you very much, and have a nice day too.
Bye.